Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
Podcast for parents and families everywhere.
Whether you have kids that plan to attend college or you have current college students, you want them in and you want them to graduate.
You want a quality education that will give you a skill set that will make you marketable for the jobs of today and the jobs of tomorrow. I am Mark Stucker, and I'm a college coach from Metro Atlanta.
And I am Anika Madden, and I am a parent, also from Atlanta, currently in North Carolina.
And I'm David Williams, and I'm a dad from Chicago, Illinois.
This week in the news, a great article by Jed Applerouth and Diana Cohen. Test optional does not mean test blind. Mark and Anika will discuss chapter 117 in the book, How Can I Increase My Need-Based Aid? Our question from a listener will be, how do you look at the endowment to understand a college's financial health? And our interview will be with Vincent Garcia, understanding the 23 colleges in the California State University system. And our college spotlight will be Chapman University of Orange, California.
Good evening, friends. I hope everybody is safe in this new COVID-19 world we're in and doing your best to adjust and enjoy life. Dave and I, we constantly talk. Our heart goes out to everybody, especially people struggling with either physical symptoms or financial hits. But we're going to make it through this.
Yes,
and
we
there's
are.
There's a saying, what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. And so there's a lot of truth to that. So let's start with a couple big announcements. Watch what happens with the College Board in the June SAT. So they announced this week that the June SAT has been canceled. That's now the March that was canceled, the May that was canceled, the June that is canceled. Did you know that, Dave, by the way?
I did know that. Well, actually, I knew that the March and April were canceled. I think the June is new. That's rather new, isn't it?
Yeah, that's yesterday.
That's yesterday.
So
Okay.
the SAT doesn't have an April, but the ACT does. So the SAT canceled March, May, and now June, and the ACT is canceled April. The ACT doesn't have a May. I'm expecting them to cancel June, but we're not sure. We'll see what happens. So that's the next thing. Will the ACT cancel June? And the SAT has said we're pushing it to the fall, and they have added a September in place. So there's now going to be an SAT in August, September, October, November, December. Bang. So anyway, that's big news. Meanwhile, many more schools, many more dominoes dropped. As to name a few schools, Middlebury, Northeastern, Swarthmore College, some of the schools that went test optional. Okay, friends, you know if you're a regular listener, we have an admissions tip and admissions vernacular word inside baseball every week. And the admissions tip this week is if you use the UVisit platform, and if you're a regular listener, you know I'm a huge UVisit fan. I think they have the best virtual college tours out there. They give you an option whether to sign up or not. Now, you can click the X and not sign up. I'm encouraging every student to sign up. This stuff is tracked. And I was on a session with a West Coast California school this week, and they were saying, please tell your students to sign up. Don't click the X. Because not only do we track demonstrated interest, but it allows us to follow up and invite you to special events. So this actually applies to all of the virtual opportunities that are out there. When you see a sign-up opportunity, if it's a school you even have a scintilla of interest in, I wouldn't, and you probably have interest or you wouldn't be doing it. I encourage you to sign up. Go through that process. It's just a couple clicks. Usually name, email, and maybe one or two other things. And for admission vernacular, our word is courtesy. Courtesy. And courtesy is a term that some admissions officers use, and it refers to after they've gone all the way through and they've picked the students they want, they need to then go back and look at faculty and staff that are like connected to the school and see if they have held enough spots for faculty kids and staff kids. And the term oftentimes for them is courtesy. Had you heard that one, Dave, or did I get you with a new one there?
I think you had introduced that to me before. I was somewhat familiar with it with my daughter's own school, University of Chicago, where over 60% of the kids are actually children of the faculty and administrators, and they do get special consideration. So I am familiar with the concept, at least.
Hey, it's one of the biggest hooks you can have.
That's right.
Out there. I've definitely seen, it's not a guarantee, especially at the very selective schools. At Stanford, it's really hard for those kids to get in through courtesy, but it can really, really count a lot. And think about it. One way to absolutely tick off your faculty is to deny their kid.
That's right.
Because a lot of times that also comes with some tuition benefits too.
Yes.
So not only not getting in you say, hey, my kid's not good enough to go here, but you lose the tuition benefits.
Yes.
Might be time to put the resume on the street.
That's right.
It's just not worth it.
That's right. That's right.
All right. So we've got some health, COVID, drug news out, Dave, and I know Anika said no, she vetoed my ask the doctor idea. But guess what? Anika's not here, so I'm sneaking one in.
Wow, this is so fresh. Just an hour ago, I looked at the Dow futures, and the futures are up 900 points. And it's because Gilead just announced that they have a drug, remdesivir, that initial, and I really want to emphasize initial reports out of the University of Chicago are showing that it had very significant success in treating some severe patients. I think they had.
Yeah. So Dave, so that's the question that I have for you is how much optimism should we glean from this? How much testing still has to be done? Is this really premature? This obviously the stock market bounces about 1,000 points. So there's the perception we now have an antiviral drug. How different is an antiviral drug versus a vaccine? Any of that stuff you could illuminate for us? I'm going to take advantage of your doctor expertise.
Well, interestingly enough, the best analysis was actually given on the Mad Money segment of CNBC when they were dissecting what does it mean if we have an effective antiviral. On the one hand, it says that if you have an effective treatment, it does mean that the economy may open up faster, that definitely if you can take the mortality rate of this drug from 1.2% to 0.02% or 0.03%, then it makes it much more likely that people have an optimism of opening up the economy going forward. However, it's not a vaccine. And that means that if you're only going to be affected by it if you still get sick. And obviously you don't want to get sick. And if you're going to use a drug that is still on patent, that is still quite new, it's going to be expensive. So it doesn't solve all of our problems. And it certainly doesn't excuse the country from practicing social distancing measures and still being on guard for occurrence of the disease come the fall. It's a step in the right direction, but it's not a cure-all. The actual cure-all will come when we actually have a vaccine.
Well, after we had that depressing podcast last week, this is at least some good news.
It is. It is.
My question is around how long typically for these kinds of things will it take for us to know, gee, this really is effective? Is that like is that like a few days? Is that like a week, or is it more like a couple months?
Apparently, the University of Chicago study was one of several worldwide studies involving several thousands of patients with this drug. And they are supposed to basically report most of their preliminary data in May, so approximately 3 to 4 weeks from now. And if it is as promising as the initial data says, then the FDA is on track to fast track that drug for more widespread testing. Now, a couple things. We already know that we've already reached the peak. We already know that most indications are that we are going to start opening up the economy at least by the second, maybe third week of May. So for this particular pandemic, this drug is probably not going to have a significant effect. However, if it is proven that it can significantly lower the mortality rate by a factor, then possibly we might feel differently about opening up colleges in the fall, knowing that we at least have an effective treatment for those few people who still may get ill from this drug going forward. So I think it's very, very promising. It does change the equation. And I'm sure that a lot of colleges are looking at an effective antiviral as one of the factors that they'll look for as to whether they're going to continue to consider online education versus opening up full time in the fall.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about it. If these May tests turn out to be, affirmative, this will absolutely lead to more and more colleges opening in the fall, which as we said last week, is what they really want to do. Yeah. But the thing is, they're going to have to be making those decisions pretty soon. Yes. I mean, this week, Boston University actually came out, it went public that they are considering online in the fall and doing that condensed year that we talked about last week. And if you heard our episode last week, Boston University was the first school to actually have some public documents come out indicating that, yeah, we are seriously considering, that spring summer plan that we talked about last week. So this could be a game changer for college admissions in the fall. And I will say this, my phone literally blew up this week, Dave, with all the students I'm working with wanting to know if, what should they do? Should we gap year? Or are we going to be going in the fall? And I just feel for them, the level of stress. It was just so thick. And one day I had 5 different calls from 5 different states. So it was everywhere. It was West Coast, it was Northeast, it was Midwest, and it was South. And so anyway, let's move on and introduce our topic of the day, because we've got a great conversation here we're going to have.
Yes.
Let's turn to college hot topics in the news.
This next article is by someone you know very well, Mark, Jed Applerouth and Diana Cohen. And before I start, can you tell me again who Jed Applerouth is?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say I know Jed very well, but he is a fantastic guy. Of course, we've had him on the podcast, and we've met on several occasions. Diana actually treated me to a very nice lunch at a nice Thai restaurant. So thank you for that, Diana. She's fantastic as well. She's one of the leaders. So Applerouth is one of the leading test prep and tutoring companies in the country, and it's Atlanta based, and it's just blossomed in the last 15 years because, when I had Jed on the podcast, episode 28 and 29, I said I regard him as the most knowledgeable person in the world about the differences between the SAT and the ACT, and that was our topic for the day. Jed's a real scholar. He got his PhD studying the test, and he continues to study. He's a thought leader, and he's built quite an impressive organization now that's really spread. What's once an Atlanta organization is now multiple cities on the East and West Coast. And I've advocated multiple times on here, both his webinars and his blogs, because they're very well researched and they're thorough. And so this is an article that Jed wrote with Diana, and is that enough about his background, Dave?
I think so. And the article is entitled "Test Optional Does Not Mean Test Blind." And what he says is, when a school announces that it's test optional, it does not mean that testing is irrelevant. In fact, he makes the point that the vast majority of test optional schools still value test scores and value strong scores in the admission process. So let's start off with a couple points. And the first one is something that you've gone through quite well, and that's the question, why are schools going test optional? And I'm just going to give some bullet points and have you comment them on them, Mark. And the first point is that schools want to go test optional because it increases the number of applicants, and it then decreases their acceptance rates and makes that school look that much more selective in the eyes of the rankings. What say you, Mark?
No, there's no question about it. I mean, we have a lot of research on this now. I mean, there's over 1,000 test optional schools, and more than half of the selective liberal arts colleges were already test optional before COVID. Literally, virtually almost every one of them is now. And then, of course, we're seeing the national universities join as well. Some of them were joining pre-COVID. You had places like DePaul, Arizona State, others that had gone pre-COVID. I mentioned 2 weeks ago, literally every single public school in the state of Oregon is now test optional, and not just for 1 year. Right. So the trend is starting to move into national universities. There's lots and lots and lots of research,
right?
Because it's very exciting to students, particularly if you're a modest test taker, to know that you will not be evaluated by your test score. So that leads to a surge in applicants, presumably those with lower test scores. There actually are a surprising number of people who have high test scores.
Right.
But they are so philosophically against the concept of testing that they get attracted to a school that goes test optional. And I've always respected that.
And so he makes the point that you have this surge of applicants. So take the University of Chicago. When it went to test optional, they had a surge of applicants, but their spots remained the same. So with
Correct.
more applicants, even if you consider more students that may be test optional, overall, you're going to lower your acceptance rates. And it makes the point that when the University of Chicago went test optional, they had the highest amount of applicants and the lowest acceptance rates, and paradoxically, the highest test scores in the school's history. Because what happens is that the only students that actually submit their scores are those that have very strong scores in the first place. So it helps the schools in two ways. They look more selective, and they also look stronger because the reported scores they have are that much higher.
Yeah, and that's why I love the name of this article. Yeah. Test optional does not mean test blind. It is just completely true.
Right.
Anybody who thinks that schools that go test optional are not conscious of their score profile and their average scores is just naive.
Right.
I visited a test optional school not too long ago, and I was having it was a counselor visit program, and the conversation about test scores came up. And this is a school that's been test optional for a long time.
Right.
And the director of admissions said, "We love test scores.
Right.
We love test scores. You know, they help us. They help us too, and they add another element and help us to make what we feel are better decisions. However, they go test optional for multiple reasons.
Right.
One, as you mentioned, you get an increased number of applications. Two, now you have higher average test scores because the only ones that submit have high scores. And then the third reason is you do increase your diversity.
Right.
And that's the only thing in this article that I didn't completely agree with. It does indicate that it quotes a study in here that challenged that.
Yes,
but I will tell you that the vast majority of people do not agree with that study. If you talk to almost any college admissions director that worked at a school before they went test optional and then after, they will tell you that they were able to take some kids that they are super excited about that would strengthen the student body that wouldn't have made it through the gates without test scores, but perfectly capable kids who they know can have high GPAs, graduate at high rates, high retention, and add a lot to the student body. And that's the other major reason why schools go test optional.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that study, Mark, because I was wondering if you wanted to go into the weeds in that. I actually took the time to read that study. Do you want to discuss that now, or do you want to leave that at the end?
No, because we'll get off on a rabbit trail on that.
Yeah,
I mean, that's certainly something we could maybe address as another in the news.
Right.
I want us to really focus on this point of, students are getting excited right now because so many schools are going test optional.
Right.
And I think they're overrating what that actually means in practical terms.
Yes, they are. Well, the second part was what does test optional mean? But I just wanted to round that out by saying, of course, what's most timely for now is because of COVID-19 postponing all the spring and summer ACT, SAT scores, they've had no choice.
Let's talk about what going test optional does not mean.
Okay. Well, it does not mean, in this study, it does not mean that tests no longer play a major role. It makes the point that test optional can help, and they stress high achieving students who don't test well, but are strong on all other parts of their application. And it can help students from disadvantaged backgrounds with limited access to test prep options. But schools still value the strong testers. What do you say, Mark?
Yeah, several things. So it's going to put a lot more emphasis on the other parts of your application, especially the other academic parts of your application. So I'm mostly talking about the courses that you took and the grades that you got, the grade trends that you got, and other testing in your application besides the SAT or ACT, such as AP scores, IB scores, subject test scores for some of the more highly selectives, even that they're optional, so they still like to see them in certain instances. So it puts more of a focus on the other academic components of your assessment. And, I had a student say to me once, and this was a student that, great kid, but academics didn't come that easy to this student. And so they said, actually it was the parent that mostly made the point. And they were talking with me. They said, these schools are test optional. Yeah. But are they still going to want all these AP courses and for you to do really well in there? And the answer is yes, if it's highly selective.
Yes.
So it doesn't make it easier. It just shifts the criteria to other academic and some non-academic factors.
Right.
And so that's really important for people to understand that. And in some cases, it actually will make it harder because of what you said. There's limited number of spaces and now you get more applications. And so now a school can just shape their class even more.
And this article points out that ironically, because of COVID-19, it's actually going to be much harder to demonstrate those other well-rounded parts of your application. Think about it. COVID-19 has knocked out many extracurriculars this year. If you're involved in the sports, that's gone. If you're involved in debating, if you had things lined up for the summer, such as traveling or different types of extracurricular summer activities, that's all gone. And for many schools, since they've gone past fail, it also diminishes the opportunity to distinguish the individual students based on their grade point averages. So ironically, not having the SAT and ACT might make it much harder for students to separate themselves from their peers because of COVID-19. What do you think, Mark?
Well, here's what I'll say.
Yeah.
If you're a modest tester, then it's great for you because low test scores will hurt you. If there's a requirement, you have to submit them. Mm-hmm. So it can be beneficial for someone who is a very modest tester.
Right.
Because it just allows you to be, evaluated in areas where you're hopefully stronger at.
Right.
But the other thing that I want to mention is this is, I didn't see a lot of emphasis on this in the article, but I think it's worth pointing out. When schools go test optional, and they've been test optional for a really long time, and a really long time doesn't even have to be that long. I'm not talking like Bowdoin and Bates that have been test optional for literally decades. Bates approaching its 40th year and Bowdoin in its 51st year of being test optional. If you've been test optional for a good 10 years, Wake Forest, for example, or even 3 years, you've been test optional for 3 years. Then what happens is your admission officers get used to reading files without emphasizing test scores.
Right.
Because one thing I will say, schools that are test optional, they really do a good job for the most part of evaluating you without those scores. They really try hard to not hold that against you. However, if you just went test optional because of COVID and it's a highly selective school, and the admission officers are used to using scores as the evaluation in the evaluation process, a lot of schools I do feel are going to say, you know what? SAT added a September section. People had September, October, November, December. A lot of administrations. If you have an opportunity to take the test and do well, I would still encourage you to submit it.
Yes.
Because these admission officers haven't been through the process that yet of mentally being trained to not look at those scores. And one of the reasons why I end up being an advocate of test optional, even that I realize it's a really strong case on the other side as well for the value of scores. But the reason why I end up being test optional personally is because of how prejudicial numbers are. If most admissions officers could, not just admissions officers, human beings, right? Things like rankings and things like that, they influence the mind in ways that have undue impact. That's why I'm ultimately an advocate of test optional, but I also respect the other view. Dave, you've got a quintile view that I think is actually interesting. I would advocate if I was voting over test optional over the quintile view, but I think the quintile view is interesting. Why don't you share your quintile view?
Well, I believe in some level of testing because there is such a diversity of quality among high schools, especially among their grades. We know that an A in one school is just simply not the same as an A in the other. And so in order to get a rough gauge of whether a student is within range of a school's academic expectations, I do think tests play a role in getting a rough guide. So I think there is significance to whether a child is in the top 20% or the second 20% or the third quintile or the fourth quintile. There definitely is. But once you get within a quintile, the question is, are you really getting a better student just because one scored a 98th percentile and one scored a 90th percentile or maybe even an 85th percentile? And I think that's...
Hey, Dave, let me stop for a sec because I just realized, like, not everybody may know what quintiles are. So quintiles are dividing everything up into 5 equal parts.
5 equal parts, yeah.
So what Dave's view, which I actually respect a lot, I'm not quite, like, I would be tough if I'm on a board and I'm debating go completely test optional or quintiles. Still think I would go test optional because of the prejudicial aspect of numbers. Quintile would be, instead of a school saying, okay, you got a 1430 and this person got a 1350. So we're taking the 1430 over the 1350. Not that all colleges do it, but there's a prejudicial aspect of numbers. Right. Instead, we'd be able to see first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and you could see the difference. But one reason why I'm a little concerned that the test students are thinking, oh, test scores don't matter anymore, is because there are a lot of times later in life where test scores will come back and bite you in the butt. I mean, we just went through refinancing our house this week. Yeah. It was so weird. You have the lawyer over there with the notary, and they've got the masks and the gloves and all this stuff. And we're at our home, and I'm like, what is this? Am I in like some sci-fi movie? But I got to talking to the lawyer a lot, and I was like, was the LSAT hard? He said, man, it was hard. How was the bar hard? It was hard. So you realize there are a lot of things, and you can speak, Dave. You know, you got the MCAT, you got the DAT for dentists, you got the LSAT, you got the CPA. I mean, you got so many different times a test is still going to be required. And while I like the test optional movement, to think that you may be able to go all the way through your life and not have tests again may be naive.
Well, I think the person that really said it best was your interview with Idan Shahar.
Yeah.
And he pointed out the fundamental problem is not that we test, but that we have selective institutions that can only accept a small fraction of the population. And whatever criteria they eventually use to decide who gets in and who gets out, that's going to be the test. He made the point that if their criteria was how many people can hop on one foot blindfolded in the middle of the night, then there would be massive courses on kids hopping on one foot in the middle of the night. So that, and if you got rid of the test, the criteria will just shift elsewhere, and the resources and the interests of the population will then focus onto whatever that criteria is to get it. Does that make sense, Mark?
Yeah, no, it does.
Yeah.
And another thing that I liked about this article is it gave the statistics for about 10 schools that have gone test optional, and it showed what percentage of kids actually submitted SATs or ACTs. And without getting into all those stats, it also quotes from a study, an Access study that Bill Hiss did, where he found that 25% of students do not submit scores from a sample of 28 test optional colleges and universities. And so there's something else to keep in mind. If you're applying to a test optional college, you can actually get this information from Common Data Set. One of the things you want to find out is what percentage of people applied as test non-submitters. Because if it's a place like the University of Chicago, those numbers were actually single digits last year.
Yes.
And so that's also a factor. So, but take a school like Pitzer, which is also test optional, and a pretty sizable number of their applicants are test optional. And so if you're applying to a school as a test optional applicant and the overwhelming majority of kids have test scores, then that just means that the school's going to pull out the magnifying glass that much closer, looking for any wart. No, I don't want to put it that way, because college admissions officers actually do try to read to try to admit, not rather than try to deny. So it makes it sound like they're trying to deny when I put it that way. But let's just say there's going to be that much more attention on basically whether you have I hate to put it this way, but I'm just going to put it this way, the academic horsepower to do the program. Because schools they tend to look at test scores as a reflection of your potential and grades as your productivity.
Yes.
And so they use test scores as a proxy to say, okay, when you get into more rigorous work, can you handle it, or are you a grinder? Are you the kid that got your grades because you outworked everybody and you did all the extra help assignments, and maybe your parents were actively involved as well? And test scores sometimes can reveal that, because when you see an extreme low score and high grades, it's sometimes and oftentimes, not always, an indication of that.
Right.
So, the point is, students just need to know that test optional does not mean test blind.
Right.
These schools are very conscious of scores when they see them. Some of you who are longtime listeners may remember in the interview I had with Peter Van Buskirk, who was the VP of Enrollment at Franklin and Marshall. And this was one time I got caught off on the air, Dave.
Yeah.
So we're just talking away. And we're talking about test scores. And I share a story. When I'm at Westtown School, we sent an applicant over to F&M, and admission officer got back to us and said, look, we really like this student, but we don't want to take him with these low test scores. Can you have him go in and apply as a test optional admit? In other words, we like him, but we don't want him pulling down our averages. Every school tries to guard their profile, their averages, because students and parents tend to judge a school based on their average scores, and they know that. So I'm saying this to Peter on the air, and he said, he throws me off. He says, I know exactly what kid you're talking about. That kid was a rock star. Am I ever glad we did that?
Right.
That's why I'm an advocate of test optional. So I didn't really realize he would know who I was talking about, but we tend to have long memories in admissions. But that makes the point more than anything.
Yeah.
If they were test blind, they wouldn't have cared what his scores were. But they said, we'll take him. Just please tell him to apply test optional, because once we see these scores, they're going to adversely impact his admission decision.
But this is where the tests are truly unfair. I know that given sufficient time and sufficient resources, a well-motivated child can easily score in the 99th percentile. I was in a school in which the majority of kids applying, my daughter's school, were in the 99th percentile. But what is phenomenal was the amount of financial and other resources that were thrown at this one test to achieve that result. And for the vast majority of middle class and lower middle class kids, it's just not possible to be looking at thousands of dollars and multiple test times, and sometimes a preparation that spans not just a summer or two, but years to achieve that result. And so that's the hidden message between the test optional, is that it's at least acknowledging that the tests truly aren't a measure of intelligence. They're not even a measure many times of passion or desire. They're a measure of financial resources and the ability of the parents to devote an inordinate amount of time and effort to achieving this singular goal.
Well, of course, that's why the landscape, environmental context dashboard, that's why that's emerged. And that's the other reason, well articulated, Dave, why ultimately I am in the test optional camp.
Right. I agree.
It's how numbers prejudice the mind.
Right.
And it's also how highly correlated test scores are to family income,
right,
race, and family education.
Right.
And that is disturbing.
Right.
It's very disturbing. And so anyway, but we're kind of going off a little bit of a tangent. We're getting into whether schools should be test optional or not test optional. What I really want people to know is that just because a school is test optional, that does not mean they're test blind. That, one of the things a lot of the admissions officers I do, and I almost called you Anika, Dave. I'm losing it, man.
Yes, you are. I'm not even Anita, man.
Yeah. I've got 2 clients now with the name Anita. 2. So I've got 2 Anitas, Anika and Anitra, my wife. But anytime I pick up a new client with any one of those names, I say, please forgive me because I'm telling you in advance I'm going to mess up.
Yeah.
I'm either going to call you Anika, Anitra, or Anita. I'm just going to do it.
Well,
but I shouldn't be calling Dave Anika or Anita or Anitra. I'm losing it. But one of the things that multiple admissions officers will actually do that are test optional, they'll say, listen, if you're not sure whether you should submit your test scores, talk to me and I will coach you through that process. I will let you know.
Right.
Now, oftentimes, this is usually good advice. Take the school's 25th to 75th percentile profile, because they'll list their scores usually by, it'll say like 1210 to 1430 or 980 to 1150. They'll list their 25th to 75th percentile. So they're cutting out the bottom quarter and the top quarter. Normally, what's good advice is take the midpoint of that and ask yourself if your scores are higher or lower than the midpoint.
Right.
And normally, if they're at the midpoint, you want to submit them. And if they're higher, you want to submit them. And if they're lower, you don't. But some of these admission officers that consult, they actually will be even more nuanced than that. They'll say, you know what? You're from like a rural town in Northwest Wisconsin, and we don't get that many people from there. So I actually think it would be good for you to submit your scores. Yeah, they're a little bit lower than the midpoint, but it may give some people confidence in the pool that, and I mean, I'm really getting into some nuance here that can vary from school to school. Generally, the rule is if you're lower than the midpoint, don't submit for test optional schools.
Right.
But the point I'm making with this is these are admission officers that are saying, I'm trying to admit you and I want to give you good advice because test scores matter. And I don't want you to mess up and send one because once I see the scores, now I have to use them.
Right. That's correct.
So that's the point. I'm using as an example to show that test optional doesn't mean test blind. These admissions officers are really saying, listen, I don't want you to make a mistake and submit scores when it's going to hurt you. So I'll let you know if you want to, bounce it off of me. And so what better way to have proved the point that test optional is not test blind?
Right. Yeah. For many kids, maybe 75 to 80% of schools that you potentially can go to are actually truly test optional in the sense that if you're a good student and you're motivated, despite your test scores, you have a great chance of getting in.
Yeah, I mean, here's what the challenge gets in with this whole thing with test scores. It's something that I said to you once before or in a podcast. It's not that colleges are hard to get in, but the only colleges that kids seem to want to go to are the ones that are hard to get in.
That's right.
That's especially true in upper middle class communities,
right?
And in private school circles and in affluent suburbs. And so that's constantly my challenge, is convincing people that there are a lot of schools out here that are not going to raise the eyebrows at the cocktail party. They're not going to wow somebody with the bumper sticker, but they can lead to amazing opportunities.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons I try to highlight a lot of those in the college spotlight section. I mean, I do have some designer names in there as well because those are great schools and people are curious about them.
Yeah.
So I try to mix it up, but I try to highlight a lot of those. And I don't know if I shared this on the podcast, Dave. One of the things I'm always curious, because I do college admissions, of course, when I see people on TV, I like to Google them and see where they went to college. And so, of course, right now we're seeing a lot of Dr. Burke and a lot of Dr. Fauci. They're on the two health experts, most distinguished health experts when it comes to this whole COVID and infectious diseases. So I said, where'd they go to college? Let me look up. So I looked up Dr. Fauci, and Dr. Fauci went to College of Holy Cross. Now, I know College of Holy Cross is a powerhouse pre-med school. I know it is. It's phenomenal pre-med school. And one of the things I'm so disappointed in, and I told our regular listeners will know, I mentioned that I've been invited to a fly-in to do the Beans Boston tour. I'll be in Boston for 5 days, visiting 5 schools, and I'll come back and do college spotlights on all 5 of them. One was going to be College of Holy Cross, but COVID not canceled that trip. Good thing is they said, Mark, we're flying you out next year, so I'll just delay it a year and I'll come back talk to you guys then. But I know College of Holy Cross is a powerhouse pre-med school, but it's not one of those designer names that wows everybody at a cocktail party and people are just, just in awe of the prestige. It's not in that camp. Now I'm going to say something that is embarrassing, but I'm going to say it in total transparency. So then I looked up Dr. Burke. Dr. Burke went to Houghton College in Buffalo area. I had not heard of Houghton, Dave.
Right.
Never heard of it.
Right.
Never sent anybody there.
Yeah.
Never had anybody ask me about it.
Yeah.
So I don't know every single school out here.
Right.
But here, somebody who went to a school. And so that's kind of the point that you're making.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. It all goes back to Frank Bruni's great book, Where You Go Is Not Who You'll Be. I think I got this title right.
No, you got it right. Exactly.
But so just putting it all in perspective, I think that the test optional movement, it's a good step forward in trying to address the disproportionate weight that many colleges and especially many parents and students put on the SAT and ACT scores. But it doesn't abrogate the fact that there are many, many colleges that have always been open to students, regardless of their test scores, which will definitely get them any place they want to go. So that was the issue I was trying to make.
Bingo, bingo. Yeah. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. We got it, right, my friend.
Okay.
I was reviewing my segment with Dave, and I don't think I emphasized something enough. So here it is. The SAT and the ACT are usually offered 7 of the 12 months in the year. But now the SAT will be offered 5 months in a row: August, September, October, November, and December in the fall. Secondly, in my 8 years doing either boarding school or college admissions, I found that admissions officers who were high testers themselves expected applicants to be high testers, and those who were modest testers put far less emphasis on standardized tests in the evaluation process. My concern is that for highly selective schools, where all the applicants look great on paper, the ones that are just going test optional for the first time, the AOs who are high testers themselves will not be able to overcome their own bias toward expecting high testing. And in the back of the mind of some of these AOs, they can't help but think, I know spring testing was canceled, but you, the student, had 5 months in a row to take the test in the fall. The example that popped into my head is a jury. Suppose you're on a jury and you see some evidence that is striking, and then the judge tells you to disregard that evidence. It isn't the easiest thing to block out of your mind. Remember, admissions officers are not robots. They are human beings who are subject to the same biases that you and I have.
Now it's time for our step-by-step walkthrough of the college admissions process.
Okay, Anika, somebody's got a super, super, super big announcement. First of all, you have to tell everybody how you set me up for it.
Oh, the big announcement. Well,
yeah, like the big meeting and then the whole family and everything.
It was more Naya setting you up than me. No, I'm just playing.
Whoever it was a good one.
So Naya got this exciting news from her College of Agricultural and Environmental Science. And so it is funny, Mark, because you texted me, because she told me she had the Zoom call with you. And I saw you text me like, I'm about to get on with Naya, just FYI. I was like, okay, I know.
Well, you didn't show your cards, be a good poker player.
So we all like bounced up on the screen for you. We all like in the screen when you show up with Mark. But to get
like everybody, except I didn't see little John, but Javon was there.
He was sneaking around. You know how John is. He was like crawling.
Yeah, Jalen was there. The whole fam was there.
So earlier this week, we got this amazing call from the college that Nay has applied to. You know, she's an animal science major officially now. She wants to be a veterinarian. And so I think he's the associate dean of the college, gives us a call. It's pretty late at night too. And he says Janaea has gotten a full ride scholarship, paying for literally everything for the next 4 years, from her books to tuition, to fees, to meal plan, to room and board, And we were all like sitting there. Well, at least I know I was like stunned for a minute. I was like, what in the world did he just say? Because it was... So of course, I normally would have texted you immediately, but I was like, no, let's just jump on the Zoom call and give it to Mark all together in his face. So that was fun. But congratulations.
I mean, I was so happy for her and your whole family. Mm-hmm. Very, very, very few people get what she got. I mean, we're not talking about tuition. We're talking about tuition, student fees, room, board, books and supplies. I mean, it was, in fact, I was trying to see if she was even going to have to pay a penny because she got this other scholarship as well from Bucks County in her area. Right. And so it may look like literally every single penny of her 4-year college experience is covered.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny, you know, I almost forgot she applied for the darn thing because it was 3 pretty big ones she applied for. And of course, obviously this one came out on top, and it was just like a very nice, pleasant surprise. Remember, she got the smaller merit award from them. I know.
I remember that. Remember, she got the smaller one earlier. I
almost forgot about that too.
Mm-hmm. And I was talking to her about another one that I thought I nominated her for, that I thought she would win. And I'm like, she's not even going to need this because she's got too much money.
Right. So yay, fun.
Because there is something, I haven't talked about it on this podcast, but there is something called an over award. Mm-hmm. You can't give more money than the cost of attendance.
Right.
And I'm like, you got a problem nobody has. You got too many scholarships, girl.
Well, it's funny you say that because she is actually going to go ahead and reach out to the outside scholarship, the one she got in Bucks County, just to let them know, because I feel like, financial aid told us, they said, well, if it says scholarship and it doesn't say going toward tuition, going toward anything, you can just take it. But I didn't feel good about that. Because they asked specifically when she was applying, because she had to go interview for this, for that scholarship. And they asked a very specific question of how much does your tuition cost? They were trying to weigh those things, I guess, in terms of the amount of the award. So I just think it's the best thing to do to let them know that she got this. Now, there's this small thing that's not covered, and it's that she's going to be in the honors dorm. So he told her, the dean told us that it could be, as much as a $600 difference or something like that. So we're going to see if that we can apply some of that toward, just take the poor. Still, that would be too much what they gave her, but we'll see if they.
Yeah, and remember the scholarship that I nominated her for, she could easily get $600 from that if she needed it. So I think our listeners may be getting jealous right now as they reach into their pocket and think about.
Oh, she's not the only one. Trust me, because he told me, it's funny. He said, I've been making these calls all day and. So, yeah, congratulations to all the kids that have gotten any amount of award. Because, we were very, very satisfied with that merit award that they gave us. It wasn't nearly as large, but so yay to everybody.
But there is a lesson in there for all of our listeners, which is, if you don't necessarily buy into the mindset that the harder a school is to get into, you have to go to that school. The hardest one to get into, you have to go.
All right.
Then if you can find the great things in schools that aren't necessarily the hardest one to get in, then you can have a chance to be a big fish in a small pond, and your stats and your overall academic profile can make you stand out and compete for these type of scholarships that only go to the top 1%, And sometimes people feel like, well, the only schools that they're interested in are the ones that are extremely hard for them to get into. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes perfect sense. Yeah. So, I love that takeaway.
Awesome. All right. What do we got today? Oh, that's my job.
Yeah, good job.
Chapter time. You think I would know by now? So, as we said last week when we talked about what need-based aid is, kind of said it's sort of a two-parter. And this week, we really delve into the question how can I increase my need-based aid. So Anika, you read the chapter. Mm-hmm. What were your takeaways? There's a lot in here. There's no way we can cover all of this, but maybe we can hit on some of the points that, resonated with you the most.
Right. Well, the quick snapshot / takeaway. So you list about 11, 12 different ways, or at least I should say ethical. I want to point that out there. Ethical ways to minimize.
I'm glad you said that.
The parent's income, which, by the way, is the biggest factor that determines your expected family contribution, your EFC number. So with that, there were about 4 on here that were really good. That were the ones that stood out to me, I guess the ones that I highlighted. And there's one that I have a question about, actually.
Sure.
So do you want me to go ahead and just call out my first one here, I think?
I want you to do whatever you want to do. You're the Anika Madden who told me, don't you dare ask Dave a medical question. And guess what? I did it anyway on episode 117. I said Anika's not here, so I'm doing it anyway, Dave.
Stop it. It's okay, Dave.
I'll rein it in. The conscience of Anika was like echoing in my mind as I did it. So I said, remember how I used to read stuff? Remember I used to read stuff for a long time? And you said, stop reading all that. And then I said, every now and then, I said, you gotta let me read a lot, like once every 20 episodes. Mm-hmm. So you do what you want to do. Anika and I are so grateful for everyone who has financially supported our podcast. It allows us to pay our staff and cover our other auxiliary expenses involved in having a weekly professional podcast.
At the start of every month, we're going to start sending a special gift to anyone who financially supports your college-bound kid.
I will be sending our donors this bonus content once a month directly to your email. The bonus content will be between 10 to 15 minutes in length. Usually it will be a college-related topic that I'm passionate about. Occasionally, it'll be another bonus hot topic in the news segment. Sometimes it'll be an answer to a question that one of our listeners submits to us via email.
And you'll receive these monthly audio blogs for a gift of any amount. We know that $5,000 to one person is $5 to someone else, and we don't want your budget to be a hindrance to you receiving this additional bonus content. So if you want to support our show, just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com and click the donate button. And if you've already financially supported our podcast, you will automatically start receiving this bonus content via your email.
This bonus content is our way of letting our financial supporters know in a tangible way how much we appreciate you. And if you have any questions at all about our monthly bonus content, just send your questions our way. That's to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Once again, questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com.
All right. Well, actually, let me start off with the one that I have the question about. So You said that if you're receiving a bonus from your job,
yes,
it says to try to defer that bonus until after the last year. I couldn't figure that out when you said after the last year.
Yeah. So, and by the way, this is not always possible. So this is what I'm referring to. Let's say you're getting a bonus for your job and the bonus is scheduled to appear on your check at the end of December in your December pay stub. A lot of times, one of the things you can negotiate is, would it be possible for me to get it in January? Because all your income is reported on a calendar year basis. So when you push it out of that calendar year, you won't have to pay it. It won't elevate your EFC for that current year.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, where it really becomes beneficial is if you're talking about bumping it to a year it will not even show up at all on your tax return. Okay. Now, actually, the FAFSA uses what's called prior year. So you're actually reporting your income 2 years before you actually go to college. Let's make it really concrete. So students that are starting in NAIA's year in college, right? The class of 2021, they have to report 2018 FAFSA information. Okay.
Right.
So what that means, if you fast forward it ahead a few years, what it means is that like 2 years from now, you'll be reporting 2020 income for her to go in 2022.
Okay.
Okay. Which would be her start of her junior year.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 years after that, she'd be out of college. So if you're able to push your bonus outside a year where you report your income, then it doesn't even show up at all.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense or not?
That was like the best illustration you've ever given.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So good. All right, good. What else? What other questions or comments that you want to make?
All right. No, that's all good on that one. So the next one is don't withdraw from your retirement plan because that will count as income. I thought that was a good one.
Yeah, and that can be brutal because depending on how your money is in your retirement plan, you can also get hit for an early withdrawal. So you can get whacked there, and then you can also have it be additional income. And remember, as we said, the FAFSA, and not only the FAFSA, the CSS profile too, they look at the student income and the parent income, the student assets and the parent assets. But it's really an income-driven formula. It's really the income of normally the parent. In case you have a student makes a lot of money, how'd you make all that money in high school? Well, their side hustle blew up, but that's not that common. So normally it's the parent income. That's really what drives this formula, unless assets are extreme. So.
Okay. All right. Now, this next one was interesting because I feel like this is a big one for many. Well, for some. Don't have the grandparents save money in a 529 in their name and then make a distribution to the child.
Yeah, and that's something I encounter every year.
I could imagine. Yeah.
But this is something that's really a problem, because something grandparents want to do. And there's different educational vehicles for your money too. You've got Coverdales, which are not as common as they used to be. 529s have really taken over as far as different saving vehicles, educational saving accounts. But that's definitely a problem. And that's one of the easiest ways actually to shift money around and make it work to your favor. Because normally grandparents won't care when they find out so much more of the money is going to, increase your expected family contribution. They're usually okay. There's some paperwork that you have to go through to switch it, but it's something that can be done. Some states make it a little harder than others.
Okay. All right.
What other ones did you see on here that you like?
I got one more. So this one says just pay down your debt so you'll have less money in the bank. I thought that was pretty practical.
Yeah, because the problem is the formula doesn't look at expenses at all. Right. And so if you're going in and let's say you got like a $600 or $700 car payment, $25,000 in credit card bills, your own student loans, what it does is there's no way in the world you're going to be able to pay what the school is going to ask you to pay. Right. So last week we talked a lot about how the formula hasn't taken into consideration a lot of expenses families have, like daycare and things like that. And we've also talked about the fact that it doesn't take into consideration the fact that people do tend to spend more when they make more. They just do. But there's another reality here, which is people overspend. They spend beyond their means, and now they're in a lot of debt. And the formula will say that in college admissions office, financial officers will often say this: it's not our job to subsidize your lifestyle. You've made lifestyle decisions. You can't turn around and expect us to give you more money because you made certain lifestyle decisions that another person didn't make. And so it's all but impossible to be able to come up with the money you need if you have a lot of debt.
Okay. All right. Well,
Any others?
No, those are my highlights.
So there's a couple others that are significant that I wanted to comment on.
Okay.
One of them is that when you have two kids in college at the same time, it substantially decreases your EFC. Okay. And can make you eligible for a lot more financial aid. And so, that can, depending on the situation and how much money we're talking about, there's some things that sometimes are in your best interest to consider, such as one kid taking a gap year so that the two kids are lined up in the same years. I'm working with triplets right now, and I'm working with 4 sets of twins right now.
Oh my goodness.
And every time I get triplets, I've only actually had triplets twice. Twins, I get a lot. But every time I get that, I'm like, I have some good news for you, depending on the school you applied to. Finally, the payback for all that hard work of you doing double, triple everything.
Right.
That's one of the biggest ways to shape this formula in a way that works in your favor in a completely ethical way. Is to try to And if you're listening and you haven't had kids yet, I tell you, I've had so many people tell me, Anika, if I knew how much having kids in the same year or 1 year apart or in college at the same time was going to make me eligible for more need-based money, I would have done this whole child planning thing totally differently.
Well, that's
sometimes
real.
I have, because sometimes I have, kids that, they're not even going to be in college together at all. Like they're 6 years apart, 5 years apart. You get no benefit at all for that. Unless you're like, you just go get a full merit scholarship, then you're like, drop the mic. If you're going to drop the mic moment like that, then you don't even need all this advice.
Man.
But that doesn't happen to everybody.
Right.
And so these are all things that I think are, there are a lot more things in here, but it's one thing I will say, just to give an example of how income impacts the formula so much more than assets. If you had a family, Anika, that let's say they made $30,000, but they had $400,000 in cash in the bank. Okay. Versus another family that had no money in the bank, but they made $120,000. Like the family that made $120,000 would be asked to pay way, way, way more than the family that had $400,000 in the bank, and $30,000. That's if a school, this is only if a school meets your EFC. Remember, most schools don't.
Okay.
So that's just something to be aware of. But one other thing is I will say is try to find out the school's home equity policy, because that can make a pretty big difference if you're somebody that has a lot of home equity. Home equity policy, there's schools that don't count any home equity and there's schools that count all home equity. And if you have a lot of money in your home, that's something that can make a huge difference. So there is one more tidbit I'd like to give. The way retirement works is kind of tricky when it comes to EFC. Whatever retirement you have in your retirement accounts, all of that is protected from the formula. So it really puts the onus on you to save early. And if possible, max out your 401ks and your IRAs and your SEP IRAs and your 403bs. I know you're fighting a lot of expenses out there with kids and extracurriculars and everything else, but get as much as you can get in there because that money is protected. What's not protected are the contributions that you make to your retirement account once your kid is in college. That gets added back in. It's untaxed income. That gets added back in. Even that it shows up on your tax return as a deduction, it gets added back in to the formula. So contributions in the current years you're in college, they'll count against you in the formula. But what you've built up before you start is protected as if it didn't even exist. You could have $2 million in your account, retirement account. It may as well be zero. So that's just a little tip.
Okay.
All right. What do we got today for our question from the listener?
It's time for a question from one of our listeners.
All right. Our question this week is from Kim in New York. And Kim asks, how do you look at an endowment to best understand financial health? For example, are there other metrics that are useful when considering a school's endowment?
Yeah, this is part 2 from Kim's question last week. And last week I took a lot of time. It was like 40 minutes on that segment. I went back and looked at it. But there's one method I never shared that I will share besides endowment. And this is a simple one. So you don't have to go to common data set and go section D here and C here and A here and H here, all that stuff. You don't have to go to Moody's. You don't have to do any of that stuff. Now, you are depending on somebody else to do the research for you, but it's pretty good research. And that is Forbes magazine. They've started this new thing where they analyze the finances of about 1,000 not-for-profit colleges every year that have enrollments of greater than 500. And they basically give you a letter grade based on your financial health. And like anything like this, it's a complex formula, and, not everybody's going to agree with the formula. But I will say that I think the formula is pretty fair. It's very comprehensive. It looks at things like endowment assets per full-time equivalent. It looks at how much money you got saved in the bank, your primary reserve ratio. It looks at what they call your viability ratio. And they assign different percentages to all this, like 15% to the endowment assets and 15% to primary reserves. And then their viability ratio is 10%. And you know what I'll do, because this is all pretty complex, I'll put the link of this article for someone that really wants to dive into this. We can put this in the show notes. If you want to read I'm not going to say what all these are, but there's definitions of all of these things. Core operating margin, they assign 10% to that. And then tuition as percentage of core revs, 15%. Return on assets, 10%. Admission yield, 10%. Percent of freshmen getting institutional grants, 7.5. That's actually interesting. That's merit money. That works against you in their formula. Because if you're having to give merit money away, maybe you're having to not, buy kids, but incentivize people to come. So that's like 7.5%. And then 7.5% is instructional expenses per full-time equivalent. And so they analyze this. This is something they've started doing pretty recently. And like 933 colleges. They don't include public in here. And they don't include for-profit. And then they turn around and they give letter grades to the schools. And so you can see which school it is. In my opinion, having looked at this, well, you might quibble with some of the formula a little bit, like why they do 7.5%. That's more important to me. That seems like that should be 15 or whatever. The overall results, I think, are good. Like the top schools that they list that they give A+ grades to, those are the financially healthiest schools in the country. And the ones that are getting the D's and F's, like the really low grades, those are the ones that are like on life support. So that's one other source that I didn't share last week, that if you don't want to do all this independent research and you just want to let somebody else do it, you can go to Forbes and look at their letter grade rankings for almost 1,000 private schools every year. What do you think, Anika?
And this is based on their endowment, these ratings?
No, it's based on those 9 categories I went through.
Oh,
endowment is one of them, but I don't want to read them all over again. You got to go back and listen to the podcast.
No. I thought you were saying they were reviewing the health of the school's endowment itself within those categories. Like all those categories are broken out in the endowment.
No, so what they're doing, they're reviewing the overall financial health.
Gotcha.
Because one of the questions that Kim asked, she asked, are there anything besides endowment? It's one of her parts of her question. And so I wanted to, can you read her question exactly again?
Yeah. So I don't know, Mark, because, okay, let me read it. How do you look at the endowment to best understand financial health? Are there other metrics that are useful when considering the endowment? So to me, it seems like it's all related to the endowment.
Well, she said, are there other metrics when considering? So that I took that part to say that, but her bigger question has to do with endowment. So let's dive into that part. Right now. How do you look at endowment? Mm-hmm. So first of all, do you want to take a stab at what endowment is, Anika?
Well, it's a big old pot of money that the school uses. True. That they have, that they feed into every year throughout the year. But what they use, I guess there's a drawdown every year that comes out that is used to spend. Like you can spend on operations or you can spend on scholarships. But it's based on the investment activity that happens throughout the year or maybe the former year, but that determines how much of that they can spend. And there's like spending policies and all that kind of stuff that caps. Like, I guess you draw down like 5% or 4% or something like that.
Those are good. Pick the right numbers. Most schools use either 4 or 5%. Mm-hmm. The national average is like 4.4 to 4.5, the drawdown rate. So that was very good. Endowment is money, financial assets that are donated to universities and colleges that are meant to be invested to grow the principal and provide additional income beyond tuition. So schools are not just so tuition driven. Mm-hmm. And so it's like some people call it a rainy day fund, but this builds up. Think of it almost like if you think of your own personal life, think if you wanted to build up your savings so much that you kick the interest off of your savings and you use the interest off of the savings for your everyday living expenses without allowing the savings amount to dwindle down. Mm-hmm. That's really endowment. And there are a number of misunderstandings about endowment. I'll go over some basics about endowment and maybe you'll have some more questions, Anika, and I'll try to answer Kim's question in the process. So in general, colleges shoot for about a 7% return. That's kind of like a goal. But the endowment return is going to vary depending on how well whatever they invest in does, right? Mm-hmm. So like for the last 10 years, because the stock market's done well, the average return has been 8.4%. which is fantastic. This last year, well, not this last year, 2019, but actually 2018 wasn't as good of a year. 5.3% was the average return. But they try to be conservative with this investing in this money because you don't want to lose your principal. And this is where the board of trustees and like really, really talented people are overseeing this process. Because you're talking about for some schools, it's a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And endowment is a place where you'll see complete extremes. Like some people have no endowment, some have buku crazy amount of endowments. And it makes a massive difference in terms of how, your school, operates based on how much endowment you have. So, Anika, do you know what they're investing in?
What do you mean, the actual investment activity? No, I don't. Mm-mm.
Yeah. So this is something where there's been quite a big change over time. So if you go back and look back to like 1990, 95% of college endowments were in traditional stocks and bonds and cash, really kind of just those three things. And then when you fast forward over to 2013, that amount had gone down to 47%, where things like hedge funds, were up to like 20%, private equity, real estate, natural resources, oil, gas, commodities. And so it's really changed. And then actually, I was just looking at the numbers for 2019. And by the way, if this is like fascinating to you, the best website is nacubo.org. That's NACUBO.org. And that's the National Association of Business Officers. They have their website where they really study this, and they do a major endowment study every single year. There are like 1,900 colleges that are members of that organization. And so when I'm studying endowment, I always go to nacubo.org right away because that's like the best source out there possible. But looking at the 2018 information, so hedge funds were like 19.1% of the money invested. Non-U.S. equities, 14.5%. U.S. equities, only 14.1%. Fixed income, 11.7%. Real assets, 12.3%. Global equities, 6.6%. Other equities, 39%. Cash on hand, 1.7%. So it's not, that's one thing that's changed. This money now goes all over the place to a lot of different investment vehicles. But the key is you don't want to lose the principal. You don't want to lose the principal. And just to show like how powerful endowment can be, I just ran the numbers from one of my favorite schools. I sent quite a few kids here. And one of the reasons I like it is because of how much endowment they have and what they're able to do with that endowment. But I took a look at the University of Richmond. Their endowment is $2.7 billion with a B.
Good gracious. Wow.
Well, and Anika, that's for only 4,000 kids. So, one of the mistakes people make when they look at endowments is they comparing apples for oranges if you compare private to public, because public's getting lots of state subsidies, right? There's really only 4 public schools that have huge endowments: University of Texas system, Texas A&M, University of Michigan, and Virginia. So that's one mistake people make. They compare public to private. Another mistake they make is they just look at endowment only. They don't look at endowment per student.
Yeah.
Because that money has to be used to fund everybody. So it's a big difference if it's a school of 40,000 versus 4,000 or 400, right?
Okay.
It's a huge mistake. And most people don't know that. You need to look at endowment per student.
Okay.
And then the other mistake people make is they don't look at how much of the endowment is restricted versus unrestricted. Sometimes endowment funds, somebody gave, but they didn't necessarily give for financial aid. If that's what you're concerned about, a lot of times colleges that have medical schools, so much of their endowment is designated restricted giving that has to go to the medical schools or to the grad schools or the professional schools.
Okay.
So that's another thing where it's kind of apples for oranges. Does any of that make sense, or is that confusing?
Yeah, no, that does. And I cannot wait to tell Javon this, because we were just talking about Howard's endowment, and he and Jalen were having a conversation about something. He's like, Howard's got the biggest endowment, but he totally does not know that he needs to consider all these things. I cannot
Correct.
wait to tell
In
him.
the case of Howard, if you're looking at HBCUs, Spelman has a much bigger endowment, HBCUS, because it's a lot smaller, and then they also don't have the medical school.
That makes sense. Wow. So it's not just about the size. You can't clearly.
Correct.
Got it.
But let me give you an example of how powerful endowment can be. So let's take Richmond's $2.7 billion endowment. So let's say they got what has been the average return for the last 10 years, which is 8.4%. Okay. That would result in $226 million per year extra that flows into your budget. $226.8 million a year. Now, just to put that in perspective, I actually got into the numbers here. So Richmond has their tuition is $57,000. Okay. Now, the average school has what we call a tuition discount rate, which is the percentage off of the sticker price that people actually pay. By the time you take away need and merit-based aid, how much do people actually pay? So the tuition discount rate now in the country is like 52%. It's the highest it's ever been. So if you take 52% off of 57,000, just assume they have an average tuition discount rate. That means the average student is actually paying $27,360. Okay. Mm-hmm. So at $27,360, that would be the $226,800,000, Anika, that they're kicking off in endowment. That is more than twice as much as the school would be bringing in just from tuition.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
It does. Sounds like you.
Now, I didn't look at room and board, student fees, all that other stuff. But the point is, schools that have substantial endowment, they can just do a lot of extra things. They can pay their faculty more. They can give a lot more financial aid. They can do something like Richmond has their Richmond Guarantee, which takes every student gets $4,000 that they can take an unpaid internship and flip it into a paid internship. So if you want to be an accountant and you want to do something in your field in the summer to get ahead for your career, but you need to make money, so you can't afford to just do an unpaid internship because you need to make money, then they say, use their career center, go get your unpaid internship, and we will pay you $4,000 for your unpaid internship. Now, but you can't do something like that unless you got money. So that's a little bit of an overview about endowment, how it works, what to look for. Any questions at all on endowment, Anika?
No, I guess the source of the school's endowment activity. Like, how do we get that information?
What do you mean the source of the activity?
Like, how do we know? If I'm looking at school XYZ, how do I request their endowment information? Like, how do I know the size of their endowment? How do I know how it's performing? Or is that information confidential to them? Like, how much information can we get?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I just Google a school and their endowment, and it takes me right to usually the most current thing. It's the fastest, quickest way.
Okay.
You can use, Nakubu's got a lot of good information on their website, but some of the stuff you have to pay for. Not all of it's free. But they got all kind of stuff in there. And so now you need to get some of the stuff we talked about last week, the financial statements and financial reports to get into some of this stuff. And then if you didn't hear last week's podcast, you should go back and listen to this same question, as I'm not going to repeat everything I said there, but I talked about how to get everything like audited financial statements and everything like that. That's where you'll really see some of the stuff. And you can also reach out and have a conversation with somebody a lot of times too. Like, it's not something that people ever really tend to do.
All right.
And so, depending on how transparent and how open they are, you might be able to have a really good conversation.
All right. Well, Kim, let us know.
Any other questions, Anika? Are you endowment out and Forbes out and burned out?
No, that was great information, because we just assumed, well, in Javon's case, assumed that just because it's a big endowment, that means that they're giving out a lot of money, but that may not be the case.
Yeah. And, I encourage people to look at the Forbes rankings. I think they'll find nobody's going to be surprised by the schools that get the A+, because the wealthiest schools in the country are probably ones that you would like if I was to say, Anika, guess someone who's got a really high endowment, you will be able to guess. You won't get surprises. You know what I mean?
Right.
There'll be a few surprises in there, because sometimes the liberal arts colleges, they're not that well known because they're not national TV. You're not seeing them on ESPN, but some of them have some of the most money, really, because they don't have graduate schools. They don't have professional schools. They don't have med schools. And so when you're looking at places like the Pomonas and the Williamses, even places like Hillsdale College, they actually are some of the more financially healthy schools, and they get some of the higher ratings. But when it comes to national universities, you're going to see the schools like the Dukes and the Emorys and the Vanderbilts and all the Ivies and Stanford and MIT and schools like that. Chicago, Northwestern, there's going to be the schools that you would tend to think would do really well on something like that. Yeah. But check it out, because I think while the ones at the top probably won't surprise anybody, I think some of the ones at the bottom will. There are some schools that will surprise you that get really poor ratings, and it's worth checking out. So we'll put the link in the show notes.
All righty, go forth and conquer, Kim.
Yeah, Kim and all of our listeners. Friends, I know I originally had said that I was going to do a bonus profile on the University of California on 120, but because the University of California system has had 5 major changes, and because I got an outstanding opportunity to interview Vincent Garcia on the Cal State University system, I'm going to push back the profile on the University of California system to a later date. But today we begin a 4-part series I'm very excited about with Vincent Garcia. And in part 1, Vince gives his backstory, including his upbringing and his extensive admission experience. I introduce our topic for our interview, understanding the 23 colleges in the Cal State University system. Vince shares how the CSU schools differ from the UC schools and the California private schools. Vince also shares how the applicant evaluation process works at the CSU system. And we talk about the selectivity of the schools in the CSU system. And we talk about whether the CSU systems have themes to them. Listen and enjoy.
And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, I am here with college admissions veteran and educational consultant, Vince Garcia. Welcome to the Your College Bound Kid podcast, Vince.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark. It's been a pleasure listening. And, when we started first, talking about doing this, it's one of the few podcasts out there, in my opinion, where you can be a veteran admissions person, or you can be a new parent or even a student and get so much valuable information. I think if you have a podcast and the professional can learn, then it's a great one.
Well, that means a lot to me, because that's kind of our goal. Our goal is, can we put the cookies low enough on the shelf that a brand new person can follow us without us going over their head? And then somebody like you who has done admissions at multiple colleges can listen and learn. Then that's what we're trying to do. So maybe we're having some success. So thanks for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
So, friends, Vince brings a wealth of experience today. He's actually done college admissions at 5 different colleges and universities, and he joins Deb Shaver, former dean of admissions at Smith, as our only guest to do admissions at 5 colleges. We've had several that have been at 4 schools, but not 5. And like me, he jumped to the other side of the desk, and now he's a co-director of a college counseling firm. And Vince reached out to me about 1.5 years ago to say how much he enjoys the podcast and likes the book, 171 Answers. And we just kind of kept in touch. He's been one of our big supporters, both morally and financially and every way else. And I reached out to him after talking to him and said, you have a lot to offer, Vince, to our audience. And it's kind of nice because a lot of times 2 people that do have college counseling companies, we can be territorial. And I think it's great when we can just work together and support each other. So definitely want to introduce you, bring you to our audience. And why don't you take some time to tell us your backstory, kind of where you grew up and various jobs you've had and what you're doing now?
Great. Sure. Well, my college journey was really interesting. My older brother was the first one to go to college and complete a 4-year degree. My parents are from New Mexico, and like many families, one of the ways that you sort of move up the economic ladder is either through education or the armed services. So my dad was in the Air Force. Got tuberculosis when he was abroad, and so he couldn't stay in the Air Force as a commissions officer, but worked for them for the rest of his life as a civilian. But he left the armed forces with the highest ranking that a civilian can get, and he closed 2 or 3 bases by the time he completed his time with the Air Force. Wow. But interesting enough, because my dad worked for the Air Force. We moved a lot. I was born in Albuquerque and grew up in Panama, and then moved back to New Mexico for a short time. And then my elementary, junior high, and high school education was all in Las Vegas, which was interesting to say the least. But I remember walking around UNLV because my brother swam there, and asking my dad if I could leave the state to go to college. And when I was in third grade, and he just started laughing. He just started laughing. He said, "Yeah, you can go wherever you'd like to go." So I'm not sure. I think that was the first time I became aware of college, but my parents supported our education. They sent us to the only private school in Las Vegas at the time. It was a great place if you wanted to be an athlete.
Was that you?
That was not me. I did run cross country, but if you, my former high school is still famous in the world of sports: football, basketball, tennis. They do it all really well. But the education part was, and I also was when I applied to college, I actually had a great college counselor, and I'm not sure. It wasn't much of an industry then, but Eric Seif,
it really wasn't. That's very rare in anything more than 20 years ago. It's very rare.
Yeah, Eric Seif was a genius at college counseling. He helped my older brother, who was a very competitive swimmer and was going to go to Duke. He went to a summer program right before the fall of his freshman year and realized, I don't think I want to be that far away. So he took a year and went to UNLV, and then applied to Oxy. That's where I went. And I remember my path through admissions. I received a fellowship to study in South Africa after I graduated. And my dad asked me, probably about 5 or 6 months before my senior year ended, "What are you going to do when you graduate?" And I didn't know. I mean, my major was politics, but every internship I'd had, and from the legislative side to the city council to the campaign side, in my opinion, they didn't seem very happy, the people. So I thought, even though I finished the major my junior year, there wasn't a time to do something else. So somebody said, "Oh, you'd be great in admissions." And I thought, admissions, what is that? And where is that?
Nobody ever plans on being an admission officer. Everybody stumbles on it. By the way, we have a very educated listening group, and we even did a college profile on Oxy, but some may not know what Oxy is. So do you want to give the longer name?
Sure. So Occidental College, small liberal arts college, close to 2,000 students now. The most famous alum is Barack Obama, who went to Punahou and then Oxy. And then I think they had a cross program with Columbia. And I think during his time at Columbia, he decided to stay. But he's been very supportive of the college since being there. And I attended yesterday a program. They have a new Obama Scholars program where it's full ride.
I know. That's a great program.
Yes. And I met two of the recipients, and it was really nice to meet both of those young women. But admissions, I've worked in admissions at Occidental and Pomona and Cal Lutheran as well, and read applications for UCLA and for Berkeley as well.
Nice. And then talk about what you've been doing recently after your 3 stints at various schools and then your file reading at the other 2.
Sure. It was interesting because I think for me, creating access has always been a part of my admissions career. So I worked in multicultural recruitment at Oxy and Pomona, Cal Lutheran, and then had a great opportunity to work at the nation's largest LGBTQ scholarship granting organization. It's called the Point Foundation, and they've supported probably over 200 undergraduate and graduate scholars pursue higher education, both undergraduate or graduate work. It's a terrific organization. They get a mentor. They complete a community service project, and they get financial support to complete their either undergraduate or graduate education. So there, I ran the selections process. We'd get 6,000 applications and we would select some years 11 scholars, the good years, sometimes over 30. And eventually I ran all programming for alumni, for campus support, for leadership conferences. And we would produce leadership conferences based on their professional affiliation. So that really compelled the organization in a strong way forward. But I still, when I was working at the Point Foundation, I was still getting calls to help students apply to college and even help some Point scholars transfer when they were thinking about getting more education and higher education. So, but unfortunately in LA, I don't know if you've seen too much of it, Mark, but the traffic is so bad. It would take me about an hour and 15 minutes to get to work. And because I started getting more and more calls, I just thought, well, maybe I can do college counseling. So with my former colleague, Carol Christensen, we started Q&A 4 years ago and have been supporting students, mostly, I would say, high school students, and then increasingly a more robust transfer population pursue higher education. So we help students apply to college and take all the wisdom that we gained from working on the admission side and then working in high schools, helping students apply and hopefully gain acceptance to college.
Great.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
NACAC, the National Association for College Admissions Counseling, has a new section on their website that is dedicated to all of the changes at each college or university that are happening because of COVID-19. And it is our recommended resource for the week. You will find information on each institution's plans and policies and policy changes for admission events, for consideration of high school transcripts, for standardized test scores, for decisions and deposit dates, for summer and fall semester plans, and so much more. Other than each college's own website, this should be your go-to resource for updates. The resource was first released on March 17th, but an update occurred on April 28th, and I expect future updates as well. The updates include additional questions and responses from institutions. The website has a long URL, but we will put the link in the show notes. We will now return to my interview with Vincent Garcia.
So before we dive into the topic for the day, what was it like, when you're reading it at Oxy or Pomona, and, there's so much individual attention that you can to each file and get to know the students, sometimes even personally, to being a reader at like Berkeley or UCLA with crazy large applicant pools in a UC app. It must have been an adjustment.
It was an adjustment for sure. I think the biggest adjustment is that for the University of California, as a reader, you don't make any final decisions. You just make recommendations, and there's no teacher or counselor recommendation. So the University of Berkeley may require some or not require, but ask students to submit recommendations, and they have a period of time to do that. I don't think they've made a final decision about whether or not they're going to do this for the whole applicant pool. But one thing that surprised me was I felt that the work that I could do at a small private school, that they had replicated that at the University of California. The process and the way that they looked at applications through a comprehensive review was very impressive to me. And I remember, specifically with Berkeley, we'd start reading in November, and they would, if they had 86,000 apps, I would say that probably by first or second week of January, they were done with the first reads, and they would move on to have two readers, take a look at the application. So I felt that they were very thorough, and the only thing that was really missing was the recommendation piece.
Yeah, and I'm going to be talking a lot more about that on episode 120. getting into that. I'm impressed as well that they can take that many files and still come up with a way to implement so many aspects of holistic admission. But today we're going to talk about the Cal State system, which is the other big system in California. And I know you're real familiar with that. So why don't you start by giving us an overview of the Cal State system?
Sure. In preparing for this, I was really struck by the way that the CSU system, there are 23 campuses. It is the biggest producer of bachelor's degrees in the United States, and that they offer, in terms of diversity, it's the most diverse university system in the United States. And you see that whether it was education or communications or information technology or business, most of the BAs being produced in the state of California are coming from one of those 23 campuses. And one thing that I thought was really interesting is that 50% of the degrees, BA degrees awarded to Latino students in the state of California come from that system. And that almost half of the enrollees for the CSU system come from transfers. So they really work to make the pool diverse and to really reflect a lot of immigration and new students and first generation students. And they also have a significant population of older students on their campuses. I think that the main difference for a lot of the CSU system for the 23 campuses, many of them, you have students who are working part-time, in some cases full-time. So it may take them a little bit longer to graduate than a student attending a smaller independent school or university, or even the University of California. So you're not exactly comparing apples to apples in terms of the type of education, but if you manage the costs well, it can be a significant cost savings to attend a Cal State.
So one of the differences when we look at Cal State versus the other big, California system, obviously the UC system, is more older students, more non-traditional students, obviously more transfer students. Any other differences come to mind, just kind of comparing the two systems?
I think another important thing to keep in mind is that their focus is primarily in the CSU system. They're the largest producer of educators in the state of California. So if you want to work on teacher education, that you're probably going to get a terrific education within the CSU system. And the University of California, you can't go directly into teaching after finishing the University of California unless you meet certain certifications. And most of the students who would do that would get the certifications after finishing at the University of California. They would probably end up at a CSU for at least a year to get those certifications. And I also think that one of the differences is in the application, and it's a big difference. It's one of the few schools where they look at your application, they look at the courses you took, calculate your UC CSU GPA based on 10th and 11th grade academic courses that have been UC and CSU approved. And they come up with your GPA, they look at your testing, and they decide whether or not you're admissible. So admissions, there's very little space. A couple of the CSUs ask you to put down activities that support your major interests, but it's literally, I worked at an engineering office. That's all you can put in there. There's no description. It was very brief, and there's no essays. And the only campus that offers early decision is probably the most non-traditional of the CSUs, which is San Luis Obispo. They have 80% of the students graduate in 4 years, which is really high, but it's very residential. It's right by the ocean. It's not like the other CSUs that tend to be more in suburban or urban areas, and its focus is really to make sure that the students they admit, and it's hard to get in and it's hard to change a major once you're there, But if you do have the opportunity, it's a great place to get an education.
Do you find that the CSUs have like almost a theme to the schools? Like the different 23 schools have concentrations that they're known for, or would that not be an accurate statement?
It's interesting. I think the best way to look that up is that some do have a theme. So there's a maritime campus where all they do are careers related to maritime. So maritime engineering, and that's if you want to be on the ocean. And that's, I think, 80% of their attendees and their applicant pool are men.
Next week in the news, because things are changing so quickly, we will announce our article at the time of the podcast. Mark and Anika will discuss Chapter 118, What is a Pell Grant and how do I get it? Our question from a listener will be, other than endowment, how can I assess a college's financial health? Our interview will be part 2 of a 4-part series with Vincent Garcia, Understanding the 23 Colleges in the California State University System. And our college spotlight will be the Wildcats, the University of Arizona in Tucson.
Friends, I am excited today to do a college spotlight on Chapman University. And I have to thank one of our avid listeners who sent in a request that we spotlight Chapman. I always want to let you guys know that you can send requests in and we'll try to honor them. So far, we've had requests from places like Brown, Angelo State, Carnegie Mellon, Northwestern, Union, Chapman, and many others. It may take a while, but we'll get it in the docket. If you send us a request, just send that to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. All right, let's dive into Chapman. So Chapman was founded as Hesperian College, and it was actually initially located in Woodland, California. The school began classes in 1861, and its opening was timed to coincide with the hour of Abraham Lincoln's first inauguration. And Hesperian had a claim to fame of admitting students irrespective of sex or race back in 1861, 160 years ago. Very, very novel at that time. In 1920, the assets of Hesperian College were absorbed by California Christian College. And in 1934, the school was renamed Chapman College. And it was renamed Chapman after the chairman of the Board of Trustees, who was also the primary benefactor, Mr. C.C. Chapman. In 1954, Chapman College moved to its present campus in the city of Orange, California. Chapman established a residence education center to serve military personnel in 1958. And Chapman College became Chapman University in 1991. Now, Chapman University offers 10 areas of study, 49 majors, 61 minors, and it encompasses 10 different schools and colleges on the campus. Let's talk a little bit about Orange. Orange, California. The sunshine. It is a city of 140.
The former land of Reagan.
Yeah. Taking us back there. Showing that 57 years of age, Dave.
That's right.
Absolutely. So Orange, California, a city of 140,000. So you can't really call it a college town. On the wealthy side, average household income on the cusp of 100,000. So almost 40% higher than the national average. Of course, it's expensive there. The average home is 700,000 in Orange. It is located 30 miles southeast of Los Angeles, or if you even want a better landmark, 7 miles southeast of Anaheim, or 5 miles southeast of Disneyland. And this is what some of you want to hear, 15 miles from the beach. So you just get a sense of the location there. Chapman's got a stunning campus, plenty of green spaces, lots of modern buildings. Overall, the student body is known as a friendly student body and fairly wealthy. 2/3 of the students at Chapman come from California, but that's getting a lot lower as Chapman's national reputation is definitely growing. This is a hot school. By the way, Dave, have you ever been to Orange?
I have been to Orange County. Yes, I have. And when I drove from LA to San Diego, and we did pass through beautiful Orange County.
Nice.
Yeah.
So Chap for decades really has had a reputation as a creme de la creme film school. And if you look at all the rankings and everything, you'll see it's considered a top 7 film school in the world. But it is so much more than that. For example, they have 153 PhD students. They have 273 students getting their doctorate in pharmacy. They have 462 students who graduated from their law school last year. And they had 255 students get physical therapy degrees last year, and another 1,200 students getting master's degrees. But no question, the Dodge College of Film and Media Arts is as good as it gets. So let's dive a little into that and talk about some of the stupendous majors that are offered within the Dodge College of Film and Media Arts. So they have majors in creative producing, animation and visual effects, film production, film studies, broadcast journalism and documentaries, television writing and production, public relations and advertising, screen acting, and I had a student this year going there for their incredible screenwriting program. Obviously, we are in the back door of Hollywood, so they're taking full advantage of that location as a feeder into Hollywood. But they have so many other exceptional programs beyond just the ones that are included in the Dodge College of Film and Media Arts. They also have dance, theater, music, economics, finance, business in general, management, computer science, biology, health sciences. They have a great program in corporate communications. Overall communications is strong there. They have another really great program in public relations and image management. And then another program that's very noteworthy would be their speech communications and rhetoric program. One of the things that I love about Chapman is a program that they offer. It's their pre-pharmacy early assurance program. And this is really great. So what happens is, as a high school student, you actually get accepted right into the pre-pharmacy early assurance program. And Dave, guess how many years you can earn your doctorate in pharmacy there?
I'm going to guess 6.
5.
5 years?
How cool is that?
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
Yes.
5 years.
Isn't it? So what happens is you spend the first 2 years on Chapman's Orange campus, where you complete all your course prerequisites for the School of Pharmacy. And then you spend your final 3 years earning your PharmD on their Rinker campus in Irvine, California. So I'm going to take a break. We're a little past the halfway point. And what are your thoughts so far on Chapman, Dave?
That's great. Well, it's not often that there's a college that I haven't really heard of and haven't had a chance to at least drive by. And this is one of them. But it makes sense that it's so strong in film. It's so close to Los Angeles. But the pharmacy is surprising. And that 5 years to get a PhD is truly awesome. Bang for your buck.
I know.
Bang for your buck. Yeah.
All right. Keep it moving. So I've already mentioned several of their excellent grad and professional programs besides pharmacy, such as their physical therapy, their law, their MBA programs, all extremely reputable. One other thing they're known for is a really strong internship program and an excellent career placement program. Another thing Chapman's known for is a very innovative academic curriculum. In fact, that's definitely one of their hallmarks is their academic innovation. That's a reputation they have earned, and it is well-deserved. So they have a lot of really unique and creative programs. One of my favorite programs they offer is a first-year program known as Windows of Opportunity. And so the way this works, it's a week-long program. It's all experiential education. So you're doing field trips, activities, and workshops in various disciplines. Now, a little more about Chapman. It's a private university, suburban Orange County, California, and it has really grown. So Chapman now has 7,700 undergraduates and 10,000 total students, including professional schools and grad students. Now, just 5 years ago, it was 17% smaller. So they've actually added 1,700 students and 1,300 undergrads just in the last 5 years. 60% female, 40% male. As far as diversity goes, this is another area where they have radically changed, even in the last 5 years, really. It is currently 56.8% white, 15.7% Latinx. It is also 12.2% Asian, 3.7% international, coming from 57 countries, and 1.8% Black or African American. Strong retention, 91% retention, high graduation rate, 77% graduating in 5 years. It's a tight, self-contained, stunning campus, 78-acre campus. 1/3 of students live on campus, 2/3 live off. Another thing interesting about Chapman, it used to be a D2 school athletically. And a lot of times people are trying to move up from D2 to D1 or D3 to D2, but they intentionally wanted to go in the opposite direction. So in 1991, they went from D2 to D3 so they could be in a more academic conference. And so instead of having to give out athletic scholarships, for those of you who don't know, D1 and D2 have athletic scholarships, D3 does not. So they didn't want to see so much of their money go toward athletic scholarships. By moving to D3, they could put all of that money into recruiting academic students. And so they've been a part of, they've had a couple shifts actually. They were a D3 independent for a long time, but since 2011, they compete in the Southern California Intercollegiate Athletic Conference, or the SCIAC. Now look, Chapman isn't cheap. Private school in that part of greater Los Angeles, Anaheim, with all of their specialized programs, is going to hit you for some ching-ching. So cost of attendance is $81,000.
Ooh.
Oh yeah. There are actually quite a few schools that have busted through the 80K mark now. You know, I remember when the first time Columbia did, I was like, man, 80. Now there's probably 40 to 50 colleges in the country that are 80K.
Yeah, you're not just breaking down my Tesla Model 3 money, you're getting up to my Tesla Model S there.
Hey, you can't talk parent of a Yaley over there. I know what Yale's almost the exact same sticker price.
Well, you know, I propose a new system for rating college tuition. It's going to be based on Teslas. The Model 3 is about $40,000. So is it a 1 Tesla college or a 2 Tesla college? Man, you broke into the 2 Tesla range here.
Hey, you're going to have our listeners thinking you're Tesla obsessed.
Only with the stock, folks.
There you go. Yeah, I know you added about 4 shares in this recent drop here in the market.
That's right.
So Chapman isn't cheap, about $81K. Need-based analysis meets about 3/4 of that. So they don't meet full demonstrated need, but they meet about 76% of need if you qualify, of course. And about 1 in 8 students gets a merit scholarship from Twice. I was going to say 1 in 8 students gets a merit scholarship from Tesla, Dave.
That's right. Well, you're going to need some money from Tesla to attend this college.
1 out of 8 students who does not have any financial need gets a merit scholarship, with the average gift being $20K. Now, it's a big sorority school. A lot of the social life, particularly for women, does center around sororities. 48% of the women are in sororities, which is high, pretty much 1 in 2. It's about 1 in 3 for guys in fraternities. It's a school that does holistic admission, so they're looking at everything. Some of the things in particular that they really emphasize, besides rigor and grades and scores, are your essays are really big. Your currics, you may remember that word from our admissions vernacular, short form for extracurriculars. PQs, it's another word we had there in admissions vernacular, short for personal qualities. They're really looked at. Special talents. Those are all things that are pretty significant factors in their evaluation. You want to see a kind of a sense of kind of typical student who they admit from a GPA standpoint, average GPA 3.72. 51% have over a 3.75, 22% between a 3.5 and a 3.74. 14% between a 3.25 and a 3.49, and about 10% would have under a 3.25. And as far as test scores go, SAT 18% 700 to 800, 52% 600 to 700, and 30% of students are under 600. Mostly all in the 5s, mostly high 500s. But there's a bit of range there, and pretty similar numbers for evidence-based reading and writing. I won't go over that. They're so similar. But if you're an ACT person, I'll let you know their median scores at 27 and their 50% range is at 25 to 30. So 25% of kids have 31 to 36 on the ACT. Another 25% would have under 25, and most being between a 25 and a 30 on the ACT. With around 40% of students being in the top 10% in their class. And acceptance rate, pretty close to 50%, about half getting in, half not getting in. So, Dave, what jumped off the page with you about Chapman besides the 5-year pre-pharmacy program, the 2 Tesla price tag, and the strength of their Dodge College and Media Arts program. Anything else?
Well, it's really those 3 things. Clearly, it's a beautiful setting, a beautiful college. The other thing is it's a very solid college for solid students. You don't have to be busting out the 800 SAT scores to get into this place. So I think it has a place on many college students' lists. I really do like the idea of getting a PhD in 5 years. That totally puts the 80,000 price tag in perspective. Because if you can get a PhD in 5 years, where other institutions you're looking at 7 or maybe 8, then do the math. That $80,000 comes down very quickly. If you are interested in film, I believe that it's got few peers outside of maybe USC in that regard, and you're so close to Los Angeles that that's another reason why you may want to discount that price tag, because I imagine that your opportunities for internships and getting relevant opportunities after graduation are that much greater because you're so close to the center of film in Hollywood. So sounds pretty solid. It is a steep price, though. Yeah.
Dave, I'm really glad you said that Chapman isn't that hard to get in. I just realized something. One thing I should have said that I never said is that when you apply to Chapman, you specifically apply into majors, and there's a process for getting into Dodge that is actually quite comprehensive. And each major has its own different set of different admissions standards. So for Dodge, there's a specific application for Dodge that's actually really comprehensive. For example, you'll have to do a Dodge college personal statement in addition to the main Common App personal statement. And even that personal statement is customized to your major. So, for example, one of the questions currently up right now, it says in 500 words or less, tell us what your distinct experiences, backgrounds are that makes you a unique candidate for the program for which you're applying. And so they want it customized to your field of study. And then they also have what's called an emphasis question that you have to ask. This is like 150 words or less. Tell us why you have chosen film production, editing, directing, production design, sound design, whatever. So you have your emphasis question. Then there's a writing sample. Here they want it no more than a page. Write a true story about yourself, something that's happened to you or someone you know. Use the story to show your unique storytelling skills, as well as to illustrate your creativity in telling a story. And then they're very specific. They say stories should be typed, single spaced, 12-point times. They even say Times New Roman font. And then they say, please follow instructions. Okay. And so this is a whole other process for people applying to Dodge. And then they want a visual sample as well. So here this is, without the use of dialogue or voiceover, make a film that's less than 2 minutes long about a character making a difficult or dramatic decision. Show that the character is pulled in 2 different directions at the emotional level to visualize their process. And then they also want a creative resume, 1-page max resume highlighting 5 to 7 pieces of what you consider your best creative work. And the thing about it, this is all customized to your major. So that's just for that area. And oh, by the way, they also want a department letter of recommendation too. So specific somebody in a department, and it says the recommendation that you do here, appropriate people for this could be an art, drama, film, TV, journalism teacher, or a boss, a supervisor, an internship or volunteer project, someone where your duties, they could assess your creative ability. And all of that actually does not go through the Common App because they're a Common App school. You actually request this recommendation directly through your portal. And so that was all for film. Okay. If somebody was in PR and advertising, it's a whole complete customized process with different requirements for PR and advertising. For example, for the major prompt there, they want no more than 2 pages describing a public relations advertising film marketing campaign that was particularly effective in reaching your target audience. And you have to go on and on and on. So I don't go too much into that, but those are just some things I wanted to highlight, that the process is very comprehensive for Dodge. It's a special process. You pick your top 1 or 2 majors. but all these questions you ask are just on your top major. And just to talk about the selectivity, it varies a little bit from year to year. Typically, the admit rate for Dodge is 1 in 5.
Wow.
But if you're talking about film, single digits admit, looking like about 1 in 12 or 8%. Okay. And while some programs could be 30 or 40. So anything you want to say on that?
Well, it makes sense. I mean, it's a great film school. It's competitive to get into that particular program. So it is somewhat more selective than it would initially appear. But still seems like a great college, a great value.
Yeah, and it's not just the location. It's the strength of their internship and career placement. Right. Very strong. And they really have some other majors that are excellent. Yeah. Public relations and image management, corporate communications, dance, really competitive for people that are trying to get in there for some of these programs. Quite a few others that are outside of the Dodge College of Film and Media Arts. That's where they've really changed their reputation in the last couple decades and grown their school from being primarily that to just developing these, some of these really other cutting edge majors. And I'll tell you what, it's, I know we don't talk that much about grad school and professional schools, but their law degree is respected. Their MBA program is really, really on the rise. So they've got a lot to offer. And I notice myself, more and more of my students I work with are asking me about Chapman. Like, I probably have had as many people ask me about Chapman in the last 3 years as probably the previous 12 years before that. So it's a hot school on the rise. And I can't remember. I'm sorry who it was that asked us to profile Chapman, but thank you so much. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this.
Yep. Another solid addition to the list.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. Your College Bound Kid is produced by Dave Vasaya of podcastengineers.com. If you find this podcast helpful, it would help us tremendously if you would subscribe and write us a review on your favorite podcast listening station. And please be sure to click the share button and send this to someone you know that can really use this information. The amazing music that you hear is by Victor Allen Weeks. Our image editor is Tauha Khan. Webmaster is Stalianos Dimitru. And marketing designs are by Kimberly Blass. And if you want to get a copy of the book, 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions, you can go right to 171answers.com. And if you want to have a college coaching session with Mark, you can send him a text to area code 404-664-4340. And if you have a question or a few questions that you would like to ask us, and we'll include them on the show, you can just email us at questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Every week, we'll take one question and include it in the episode. We don't like your questions. We love your questions. So send them our way. And by the way, check out our website, yourcollegeboundkid.com. Again, we thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to meeting with you again next week.